Hello, everybody, and welcome to our today's webinar about tax saving for freelancers in 2020. I'm really happy to have Andreas and Tino here. At the moment, unfortunately, it's just Tino because we are our tax consultant. Andreas is struggling to get to get into Crowdcast. I think he has some specific requirements with his firewall, so he can't join for now, but we're just trying to solve the problem. And maybe we all have to switch in a Google Hangout that he can join us, because I think, especially in the end, it will be really nice if he can join us and answer all your questions. As you can see, Tino is just solving the problem, and I'm sure we will have a solution in a few minutes. Yeah, in the time between, I use the opportunity to introduce myself, and also really shortly, really quick, what Uplink is doing. So basically, Uplink is a free network for IT freelancers. We have like more than 1,300 freelancers in our community, and we're trying to be like a fair, transparent alternative to classical IT recruiters. So we're not caring about the contracts and stuff like that. And our heart is like our living community. And in my role as a project and event manager, I'm also responsible to find like nice partners and organize events for our freelancers, such as this webinar, for example. So it's a perfect time to introduce Tino. I'm glad that you're here. Do you already have a solution for our problem? How we can make it possible
Hi guys,
that Andreas is joining?
nice to have you all here. Today, the agenda we're going to discuss is first of all a short introduction of what we do at Accountable, and then we're going to dive into like the most important issues for you to know as a freelancer in Germany in 2020. We're also going to touch a couple of Corona regulations, and most importantly, we're going to answer all the questions you might have. I hope you brought a couple of them there. Of course, at Accountable, we know a lot about taxes, but what we're going to do is we want to have our tax advisor Andreas with us. We just managed to join, I think, down there. You can see him.
Ah, nice.
That means I was about to say we're going to switch to Google Meet, but I think we can just use this platform just as well. So happy to introduce Andreas, who is a tax advisor, has been a tax advisor for many years, specializing in freelance problems, also working with a lot of developers. He is a developer himself. He actually worked on a couple of tax software solutions in the past, so I think he's very well placed to answer your questions. And we've a couple of those workshops in the past. And yeah, I think we should dive in. Andreas, you have the floor.
Yeah, thanks. And sorry for late joining this call. But now I'm here. So yeah, thanks for the introduction. It's I'm working especially for freelancers for more than 15 years. I became tax advisor 2003, and then I'm working for KPMG, some other tax and technique companies. So I'm very happy to be here, and I like to work together with IT guys and programmers. So I missed the first minute, so you probably introduced already Accountable. Is it right, Tino?
Not yet. I think we would go quickly through it.
Okay.
I think we should start with a short agenda to give everybody a good understanding of what we're gonna cover today. So I briefly discussed it. We are gonna explain you briefly why we are doing those webinars, what is the background of Accountable, and also why we're partnering up with Andreas. Then we're gonna dive into the tax tips and what to look out for, also touching Corona rules. And of course, there's a large section here reserved for your questions and answers. So if you've brought questions, please feel free to post them at any time. In the past, we've done a couple of those workshops and later on webinars when the Corona crisis hit. It works best if you just give us your question when you have it. If there's something coming up where you want to have a deep dive, please just post all your questions in the comment section. I will then try to collect them, and we will try to answer them for the benefit of everybody here in the call. We've also brought some other questions that people had in the past. So I think we have a good understanding of what could be on your mind and what is like the most impactful tips for you as freelancers in Germany right now.
Yeah. And if you want to get rid of your questions, you can use the button "Ask a Question" in the toolbar below. That's the easiest, I think.
Yes, please do so. Comments or the question bot. We're gonna collect them, and we're gonna work on them bit by bit. So be sure to answer everything that's coming up. So I would say let's dive right in. What do we do at Accountable? Basically, we build a tax app for freelancers to automate everything to do with taxes. Maybe just to put it simple, think of it as an N26 for taxes. If you feel like testing it out, for the Apply community, we have the ability to make a free pro account with the code TaxPoc. So it's down there. I'm going to pass it on later on again. And to give you a short idea of why we deepen taxes, we feel for freelancers and self-employed, there's a lot of work they have to do, the state puts on them, starting with how do I register, to how do my VAT return, how do I get my income tax statements. And I think some of you might have learned also with the Corona crisis, you're back there with a lot of formulas and forms, and you don't know how to find your way around this. So we've built an app that with tax tips gives you an idea like where can you save. We're going to cover this later on when we talk about expenses you can use to save taxes. So timely tax tips, and also deadline reminders about VAT, the sum of VAT. You can actually now do your VAT return directly in the app with one tap. It connects to the government API Elster. Then you can obviously do your invoicing, and you connect your bank account to get our tax engine to give you more personalized tax tips on where you might be able to save some more. So it's kind of this universe of bookkeeping and taxes without it making feel too bookkeepy. It's an app where you can on the go just scan your expenses and have them in the right tax brackets. That's maybe just quickly what we do at Accountable. Short intro. You can get more information at www.accountable.de/en. We pride ourselves that we have one of the few tax solutions in Germany that is actually all in English. So, and in plain English, not text German English. So you should find your way around pretty easily. That's for what we do at Accountable, and I think we should dive straight into your field of expertise, Andreas, and start with our most important tips for you to do as a freelancer. Andreas, you want to take it from here?
Yeah, thanks. So first step is get it right from the start. So the first webinars we had were beginning of this year, January, and they always said January is a good time to make some changes. So if you did it wrong the past time, then you can change it right now. Right now it's not January, it's August, but it's also, you can change it. You can make the changes to your bookkeeping. You can do it better. You can bring it in order. Right now, you don't have to wait until January to do it right. So, and therefore, I will show you one way you could do it. It's the paperwork way. So I have a hard copy folder here. So if you go to a Steuerberater, a tax advisor, and you want him to do your bookkeeping, you can have one of these folder, and you print everything and put it in the folder for your bookkeeping. Let's say all expenses, you get an email with a PDF file, you print it, put it in the folder. Or if you send an invoice to your client, you also would print it, and you would also put your bank statements in it. So I made some categories. I'm not sure whether you can see it, because I use my mobile phone within this webinar. So we have 4 categories. The first one is unpaid invoices. So let's say you write an invoice, you put it in there. For bookkeeping purposes, it's nothing really happens because you haven't received the money. If you receive the money, then you put the invoice from this category in the next one, and this is the time for tax purposes. So let's say this invoice was paid in December last year, so you need to put in this invoice in the December VAT return and the bookkeeping, and so this month it will be taxed, not of the invoices. You print it with a thermo transfer printer, and it fades out, and it's not possible to read. So you should make a copy of it. So after a few months, you will be able to read this. And I have some examples of expenses, of bad examples, negative examples. Just think about. I'm not sure whether you can see it, but maybe yes. If you think about what it is about, you won't have a choice probably to understand what the person have bought and what's the reason for it. It says Einzelstück, 14 euros. The one is with the 19% VAT, the other one 7%.
Oh, I'm sorry. It seems like that Andreas is out at the moment. 1 second.
Yeah, that was a question. Is Andreas stuck only from you, everyone? That was also what I was
Yeah,
thinking
same
at the
here.
moment. So I wasn't sure was like my connection or his connection. So thanks, guys, for pointing this out.
Yeah, no worries. We can go a bit back.
I think you should be back any minute. So maybe I can take it from there, as we've done this workshop quite some time. So key, as he always points out, is to have your bookkeeping in order and have some categories where you put your bookkeeping. There is a standing rule in Germany that all your invoices, all your receipts, restaurant receipts, they have to be archived up to 10 years. So, and this is something you can get around digitizing your receipts, but to legally be able to throw them away, you have to have like a 4I principle. So what we recommend always is to use some kind of digitization archive, so or some kind of archive. So one way is like the paper way Andreas was just explaining. You take a receipt that will fade out over time and make a copy just in a copy shop and then file it. So if there comes a tax audit, you can go back to it, or you find a way to scan it, digitize it in some way, and Andreas told me that like, in his many years as a tax advisor, he never had a tax auditor ask for the originals. So you should have them somewhere, but even if you only keep it in a box and you have digitized it with some context, this could and should be enough, because you can still like refer to, hey, who had I this dinner with, and what was the reason for it. So that's basically the issue he's putting to you. You have two ways to do it. Do it the old classical paper way in a folder, or do it digitally, but decide which way to go. So either you go all digital, or you go all paper. If you get invoices that come by email, remember that you will have to keep this email, this digital email, also as an original. So that also counts as archiving. So don't delete any invoices you get purely digitally. What you could do is you could print it out, put it in a folder, or you just find a digital solution. You can use a Dropbox or anything else, or what we, of course, at Accountable do, we say, hey, just scan it with our app and have it OCR'd, and then it's going to be in your tax. And you can use it for your tax return and have it also archived for future reference. So that is basically putting together what Andreas always says for getting it right from the start. I hope we will be back pretty soon. Moving on to the second part of what we always hear in our workshops. VAT is oftentimes seen as a kind of a complicated thing. So many people opt for Kleinunternehmer if they can. Just for reference, the thresholds here are 22,000 and 50,000 euros. It's not always the best option to go for Kleinunternehmer, even though if you're just starting out, because you cannot deduct the VAT on your part. So what we always say is play the VAT game at your own advantage. And I'm happy to have Andreas back, because maybe you can just chip in. I just went through the paper or digital decision you always put to people. And I'm at the second point, play the VAT at your own advantage.
Okay, so I have no idea when I stopped. Did you just recognize after why I get no reaction?
Maybe we can start. We can jump in with a question that came from Andrew. He says, my partner does everything by paper and can confirm the giant folder full of receipts stuck on A4 pieces. So what's your experience with freelancers using paper archives and paper receipts? What's your recommendation here?
My recommendation is not using paper receipts. It's usually most of my clients working with, on the one hand, Accountable, the other one working Dropbox or Google Drive. This is much easier because you can keep the receipt and just put it on the folder, and I can use it. The most complicated thing is if you're working with paper, it's to send it to the tax advisor. He sends it back next month. You send it back the next month. So it's the easiest way is to work it digitally. If you have these small receipts, these small ones, you can stick it on a A4 paper. This is possible. Then you can easier put it in the hard copy file, or you can sometimes I just stick it. Also some of them on one paper. This is possible. This is easy. You just need to make sure that you don't lose it.
Okay. Yeah. Thanks. I think that's basically like also kind of what I was putting down as or telling people from what we've been telling people in workshops before. So I think now probably like let's go to the second part of what is actually the benefit of maybe if you have to charge VAT, but you can also have a benefit out of this. And this brings us like to the second point of our slides.
So let's say the decision to be a Kleinunternehmer or not a Kleinunternehmer. So you can, if your turnover is maximum of 22,000 a year, it's not necessary to charge VAT, but it's maybe better for you to to do it voluntarily, to charge VAT, because on the other hand, it's possible to get the VAT back that you pay to others, to other companies. Let's say you buy a computer and it's 60% VAT included. You will receive the 60% back from the tax office, from the Finanzamt. But this is only possible if you charge VAT to your clients. And if you think about, let's say your clients are also companies, they can get the VAT back that you charge them, then it doesn't make a difference for them if whether you charge a net amount plus VAT or a gross amount without VAT. So for you, it's better if you just have clients as a companies as clients. It's better to have VAT, to charge VAT, to get the VAT back. So this is something you have to keep in mind. And usually you couldn't live from, let's say, a turnover of 22,000 a year, not for a longer time. You have to pay your health insurance and you have to pay your pension. Afterwards, it would probably be better to be employed than to be self-employed for just 22,000 a year.
Yeah, I think that's also a question we receive oftentimes concerning the Kleinunternehmer status. So this is something when people start out working as a self-employed, maybe as a side gig. But the decision to not go for VAT, it can also it takes away the advantage when you buy, say, like a computer and your laptop. VAT could be like a big chunk of this. So yeah, that's also one of the reasons to consider. I think now is a good time to move on to the next part, the lookout for personal expenses, and that's really where a lot of the meat is, and where you can actually save a lot of money. So I think I'll start with this because it looks a bit like to me that Andreas is frozen. So if not, please say something, Andreas. Otherwise, I will start going through this list. So home office is certainly a very big issue, and a lot of people actually shy away from using home office because they've heard somewhere that it's really hard in Germany to deduct your home office. And it's certainly true. There are a couple of rules to it. The general home office rules are you need to have a separate room, which is actually only your office. You cannot have a couch in it. You cannot use it as a guest room. And it happens that the tax office checks this. What they mainly do in the first step is they will ask for your rental contract, and they will ask for a layout of your flat. So if you live in in an apartment in Berlin with one room and a kitchen, it will be very difficult to argue that this one room is actually is your workspace. Also with two rooms, it can be difficult. So it has to be out of the layout of the flat. It has to be reasonable that this actually could be your study. If you are able to, and in Corona times, a lot of us worked from home. If you are able to argue that you have a study, then this actually is something that could make a sizable difference. And also, just to keep in mind, back of your head, before the tax office comes and rings at your door, they write you a letter. So you still have some time to make sure your study really looks like a study, just for reference. There are a couple of other things that people forget. If you work as a freelancer, even though if you don't deduct your study, you can deduct your office lamp, the chair you're working in, and also a desk you're using for your home office. So all this are things you can deduct as a freelancer. And there's also a tip Andreas always gives concerning the home office that has to do with your friendly neighbors. Andreas, that's the right time for you to jump in.
Yeah, I just went through my friendly neighbors outside. because maybe it's better the connection. Yeah, what you can do is if your home office is not at your home, it's in your neighbor's room, in your neighbor's apartment, then it's not an home office, it's an external office. And if you rent it for business purposes, you can deduct the expenses. So you just need to go to the next door. It don't need to be far away. It's just the next door. You rent it out, and then you can use it. And it should also be possible. I haven't had this case, but it should be possible to change it. So the other one just rent your office at home. If it's working, if you do it so, if there's some reason to change or to do so, it's possible. You can deduct 100% of the expenses.
Exactly, because the strict rules in Germany for the home office only apply if it's an office, a working studio within your personal flat. If it's outside, you don't. It doesn't fall under those strict rules. So that's basically the part of the home office. So if you've lately bought something for your home office in Corona times, a lamp, a desk, whatever, you went to IKEA, be sure to deduct this. Next one up is work equipment. We always have a lot of questions on that, starting with the new iPhone to a laptop. Andreas, you want to take that up?
Yeah, usually you can deduct everything that's plausible. That you mostly you just need a reason to deduct this, and then it's possible to deduct. Some expenses are quite interesting. You could look in the details. So one example: public transportation. What are you doing with your BVG ticket, but you pay monthly because you use it privately and for business purposes? There's a rule for this. If you would buy your business tickets, if you buy single business tickets and they would be more expensive than the monthly ticket, then you can just deduct 100% of the monthly ticket. So this is a very easy reason, and usually it's most of the tax officer wouldn't really check this, and it's hard to audit this and find out whether it's correct or not. So usually you can just deduct the BVG ticket. And the same works for telephone. So and the internet. So if you have used internet at home, and of course you use it for television and also privately, you can estimate on the one hand, let's say 50% business purpose, then you can deduct 50%. Or what you also can do if you just need it for your business, and it would be the same expense. It doesn't. So if you use it also privately, it wouldn't be more expensive. Then you can just deduct 100%. And
so basically, what you're saying here is like if I have like an internet flat, and I need this to work, and I need like obviously a proper flat rate with a high volume to do video conferences like this, then I can actually deduct 100%. And if I in the evening do some Netflix streaming, that's not harmful and actually can be like part of this expense. I could still use it 100% business expense.
Yeah, that's it. That's true.
And we've also got those questions a lot for cell phones. So you say as long as it's not say as a pay-as-you-go volume, but it's like a flat rate for your volume, then you could also deduct 100% if it's your business phone.
Yeah, the same for Bahn card. So if you use the Bahn card and it's better to have it just for business, then you can also use it privately and 100% deductible.
Yeah, that was like a lot of questions we always had on the work equipment. One other question I might take up is now you buy a new laptop, how you deduct this? Can you say, okay, this lowers I buy a laptop for 3,000 euros, a nice new Mac, so can I deduct the 3,000 euros then in 2020?
No, you can. It's not possible to deduct 3,000 euros for a computer just in 1 year. You have to spread it through, it's called the German Nutzungsdauer, so the time you will probably use it. And usually the tax office says a computer or a mobile phone will be used for 3 years. So then you have to divide these the net amount by 36 months. and then you can deduct this time for 2020. But you can also, in all cases, you can deduct VAT and get it back from the Finanzamt.
But only if you're not a Kleinunternehmer. So that is, again, one of the reasons where it makes sense to actually pay the VAT and go through this VAT regime.
And it's the same for equipment that belongs to a computer. Let's say you buy a computer that costs under 800 euros, let's say 750 net, and then you buy a monitor for 150. In total, it's 900. Then it's over these 900 euros, and then you have to divide it also by 3 years or 36 months and deduct just a part of it in 2020. But it's not a big issue. It's not you don't lose any taxes. It's just that you pay higher taxes right now and lower taxes later on.
So yeah, it's spread over a couple of
shifting.
years.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, nice. So let's move on to the next category. We always with workshops. We also did in factory with a nice crowd. The question was job training. So I have a Udemy course. I'm learning a new language. I'm learning the new say the programming language, say Python. So what about those costs?
Yeah, all job expenses, if it's reasonable, it's deductible. So of course, if you have a training, it's deductible. Also the travel to the trainings, if it's a local training and not online, books, everything that belongs to this is deductible. Of course, sometimes you have to explain whether it's reasonable or not. Let's say you want to learn Spanish in Mallorca, then maybe it's not possible to deduct this because it's not the business reason. But if you have many clients, maybe it could be deductible depending on the case.
Yeah, I think there has been always have been questions on German courses. If I learn German, and there have been some rulings also, and that's why there's a bit of confusion. If I'm an expat, I'm working and living in Berlin, and I want to have more German clients. I'm doing a German course. Can I deduct it or not? What's your take on this?
I would always give him a try if you want to work in Germany and want to get some German clients. Of course, you need usually need to speak German, so I would do it. It's not 100% clarified. So let's say if you are an employee and your employer would pay for it, then it's deductible. But if you're not working as an employee and the employer doesn't pay, then it's not deductible. In your case, as a self-employed, you are your own employer. I would say it's deductible, but there isn't a court case. Usually, it's nothing that it's not very often that they'll audit you in this case and check into the details. The German classes are not very expensive, so therefore I would always give him a try, put him as an expense, and of course explain it if the tax officer will ask for it.
So I think that's generally your recommendation. It has to be reasonable, and you have to make the case. You have to have a good explanation and make your case. I think now's a good time. Maybe there were some questions on some issues we touched early on. So there was a question: why can't I deduct my monitor and computer separately? Why do I have to do it together?
Yeah, it's only the case if you buy it at the same time period, let's say, because the monitor usually couldn't be used by itself, so you need to use a computer for it. If it's reasonable and you could use the monitor by itself, then of course you could deduct it, but this is usually not the case.
And there was another question that came in before, and when I was saying if you get an invoice by email, you also have to archive it. So the question here was, do I actually have to archive only the invoice, so the invoice document, or also the email it was sent with?
Yeah, you always have to archive the original, and that means if you get an invoice per email or digitally, this is the original and you have to keep it. If it comes per email and the email has some information that belongs to the invoice, that's important. So let's say additional information to the invoice, then you have to keep the email. If it's just an email, this is my invoice, please pay it until this date, and all the information are included in the invoice, you don't need to keep the email.
So then you just keep the PDF, and that's good enough.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, thanks. Moving on to the next very impactful issue, the per diems. A lot of people are aware that when they're traveling, per diems can be an issue, but I think it's bigger than that, Andreas, right?
Yeah, it's not a big issue. It's quite simple. My experience is that many of my clients do it more complicated than it should be necessary. Let's say if you're outside of your home or your business room for more than 8 hours a day, you can just deduct 14 euros per day. So let's say you're working in Berlin, starting at 8 in the client's office and come home at, let's say, 7 o'clock in the afternoon. Then it's more than 8 hours. You can just deduct 14 euros. You don't need any invoice, don't need any receipt for meal or anything else, just 14 euros. It doesn't count for VAT, it's just for income tax. If you stay for a whole day, then it's 28 euros. And if you go to another country, it could be more. Let's say Brussels, it's about 135. No, it's not for the meals. I think it's for the staying overnight.
It's for the overnight stay, right? For
overnight. Yeah.
I think actually I know that because we have an office in Brussels.
Yeah.
It's actually 56 euros if you stay an entire day for your per diems. But,
yeah, just per diems. Yeah. If you stay overnight, it's just outside of Germany, then you can have the standard deductions like 135. And you have to keep it in mind. It could be more advantage for you to have the standard deductions than hotel receipts, depending on the case. And it also works if you stay by a friend and don't pay anything, you can deduct the standard deductions, let's say the 135 for Belgium. Yeah, and I think it's included in the app, isn't it? So you can just add it and the app checks it whether it's correct or not or reasonable or not. If you do it on your own, you just need a calendar and just fill in the dates when you're outside your home or your office and just make a rough calculation. It's not very complicated.
Yeah, so there are actually official lists for each country and each city. So if you want to look at this up, you can go on our website, and we have information on this where you can get a link to the official list from the government ministry that tells you exactly what you get for London, what you get for Paris, for which country. So it's a very detailed list, and it actually can add up to quite some money if you do this over time. And don't forget, even if you're in Berlin working at a client site, it's 14 euros per day, tax-free, and do this like for 1 month. This adds up to some money that is absolutely, you don't have to pay any taxes on. So
and additionally, you can do it for the past year. If you haven't filed your yearly tax return, you can do it for 2019. In 2019 was 14 euros half a day and 12 euros half a day and 24 euros the full day. But you can just add it to your bookkeeping for 2019 and reduce the profit a lot and save some taxes.
Absolutely, yeah. So moving on to the travel and hospitality issues. So those are the rules. Let's start with restaurants. Thank God they open again. So can you remind us, like, on the rules for inviting people for lunch, dinner? What are the rules that apply here?
Yeah, the rules are that if you invite someone for business reason, then you can deduct 70% of the expense, but you get all the VAT back you pay to the restaurant. You have to put a note on the receipt and add the people you invited to and the business reason. You don't need to go into the details. It's just, let's say, project X and Y or acquisition. It's just enough to put as a reason on the receipt, but you have to do it. And you can also add tip. Let's say you pay €2 tip on it. You can add to the receipt, but you couldn't deduct VAT on it. This is for on the bookkeeping side. It's very, very complicated right now because of the changes for the VAT rates from 19 to 60% and 7 to 5%. Many of these restaurant receipts right now have two different VAT rates on it. And if you give tip, then you have three different VAT rates, 0, 5, and 60%. And if you do it correctly in the bookkeeping system, you have up to six different situations that you need to keep in mind and put in the system. Hopefully, Accountable does it automatically. Probably yes. So I could see that it was working. So yeah,
Yeah.
you
So,
have to
but
check it and do it correctly.
I think that's actually where automation plays a big part when you scan a receipt and it's automatically OCR'd and deducted. But on the other side, a lot of freelancers stay afraid to use restaurant receipts too much. What's your experience? Are people using this too much and getting fined for it, or are people rather like not taking advantage of the opportunity?
Yeah, most of them don't take the advantage. They do it not too much. They do it the other way around. I don't see it very often, the restaurant receipts. Maybe it's we're just going out for private reasons, but sometimes, let's say you're working as a developer in a co-working space with your colleague, why don't you could invite your colleague for a business reason because you're working on the same project or you have any other reason, and the next day you will be invited by him, and then it's deductible on both sides. You could do this, and you should do this to deduct the expenses. If you would be my client, I will check this, and if you had too much expenses, if it's not reasonable, then I will tell you. In all other cases, if you do it on your own, you can just think about it. Let's say if you're working as a developer, is it reasonable that you invite someone every day? Probably not. If you're working as a salesperson, then of course it's reasonable that you invite someone every day or two times a day. That's maybe it's reasonable. Just think about it. But most of the cases, you could do it more often.
Yeah, by the way, actually in our app, if we see that someone is having too much of it, we give a notification, hey, you're having a lot of restaurant expenses. This is more than the average. So this is where software comes in handy and can give you averages and like a guideline. So good point. There's some questions I would like to try to answer at this point. So there's one question. If I work for 6 months for a client on site only in their office, can I still get per diems for it?
No, it's capped unto up to 3 months. So the tax office says after 3 months you will be, you found a solution that you don't need to pay too much for your own meals. But if you change the client after that, then it starts again with a 3-month period. So yeah. Maybe you have to have some projects in between.
Yeah, so it can't be like one client 6 months without any breaks in between, but if there are breaks, then actually
yeah.
Next question was, can I buy a car and deduct it as a freelancer? That's
a
big one.
Yeah, you can buy a car for business reason, but it's not that easy just to deduct the expenses. There are different possibilities. So let's say if you use the car for more than 50% for business reason, then you have to put the car in your business and you have to deduct 100% of the expenses. That sounds very good, but on the other hand, you have to tax the private use for the car. And usually it will be taxed by this 1% method. So the tax office says, okay, they will take just 100% of your gross amount that you should pay for the car, and then they take 1% and tax it as income. At the end, it's better the newer the car and the more often you use it for business reason, then it's better to deduct the expenses within your business. If you just use it a few times and it's quite an old car, usually it's better not to have it in your business.
So basically, the idea of the German state is to support the German car industry. So new cars are attractive to businesses. So if you want a shiny new car, it should be on your business. If you have like a rather like a used one, then it might that's only like a general idea on this. If you need more information, you can also get more information on our website. We have the detailed regulations. We have it posted there. Moving on to the next question. Am I stupid for not deducting some small expenses just because my laziness? Are there any consequences other than losing small amounts of money?
No, there are no consequences. It's just small. But what does it mean, small amounts of money? It depends on the income bracket you. So on the amount of income you receive. Let's say if you are at the highest tax rate, and let's say every month you lose 100 euros of expenses, then you lose about 50 euros of taxes. So it's depends on the case, but it's okay if the tax office they don't care about. So if
they're
you
happy
don't,
because you pay more taxes than you have to. But you always tell people, hey, how much time do you have to work for a net amount of 50 euros? So if there's an easy way to file all your expenses, it can be like it can be a nice sum over time. And if you just look at the per diems logic, those are small, 14 euros per day. It doesn't make you rich, but over time, this adds up to a sizable amount of money that can really make an impact. So in Germany, you pay a lot of taxes and for all the infrastructure we have, but I think as a freelancer, you have a lot to do with your taxes. So optimizing on this it's not a bad approach. We try to make it easy with our app, but and give you an overview here now in this webinar what you can do. Last two questions, maybe just to round this up on the per diems. Can I get 3 months per diems for a 6-month contract or none at all?
No, you get the 3 months deduction, and after 3 months, then it stopped.
And is it any different if you have 3 days home office and 2 days on site?
Yeah, of course, for the home office days, it's not possible. You won't receive money, and it stopped after 3 months, not after 90 days of deducting expenses. So it's in this case, it's better to go to the office and not stay in your home office.
Yeah, so it's real money then in the end. One last question there. Does Accountable offer year-end tax return declarations as well? I can answer this. So we're going to offer this for 2020. For 2019, we work with Andreas to provide a income tax based on the information and data you put into the system, into our app. And maybe like the last one to have this cleared out. How do I prove that I was at the office? Andreas, you don't need any proof, right?
No, usually you don't need any proof. Usually you send an invoice to your client, and usually you can. It's possible to check this, but yeah, usually you don't need the proof. It's they usually will accept this. What they can do, the tax officer, they can ask your client whether you stayed in the office or not. That could be possible, but I haven't seen that before. That's fine.
So that's why the per diems, they very say light on paper, and they real money. So this is something we always come back to in the webinars.
If you want to make it clear and sure, you can just get a statement from your client that you had to work in the office. Maybe you have a contract or anything else. Then you should put it in the contract. Then it's fine.
Okay, thank you. So maybe just I think we're coming to the end of the webinar. Maybe just a quick recap of the Corona grants. We had special webinars on Corona, so we don't want to deep dive here, but you always remembered people on what is important there. Maybe you can just quickly go through those 3 points I've put here on the screen.
Yeah, it's let's say the Corona grant is over. You couldn't just apply for it. Now it's these Corona-Überbrückungshilfe. It's, let's say, the second Corona grant, but you couldn't apply for it on your own. You have to go to a tax advisor or accountant, a certified accountant. They can apply for it for you. It's a little bit more complicated because they need a lot of information from prior year and this year. So it's just working if you have your bookkeeping clear and in order, then they can check it and apply for it in the future. It's still always the question whether you have to pay it back or not, the Corona grant, because at the beginning you just could apply for it and they have really not very, usually we haven't checked it, they just gave you the money. And especially for freelancers, they don't have many expenses and you probably have to pay it back after a while. You should check this. That doesn't mean that you have to pay it right now back to the tax office, but you should check this right now whether you should pay it back and save the money. What can happen is next year you file a tax return for 2020. The tax office checks it. They audit you and checks whether you were eligible for this Corona grant, and then you have to pay it back. And when it's a huge amount, maybe you get a penalty on it. I'm not sure. It's the first case in this scenario. So right now it's the best way to check and save money. Maybe you have to pay it back later on.
There is one question: can you apply for Corona grants if you're a full-time employee but also freelancing during your free time? So maybe I can answer this and you correct me. No, you can't. And the time to apply for Corona grants is over, and it always was only for full-timers, right, Andreas?
Yeah, and it's also the Überbrückungshilfe. The second Corona grant is also for full-timers. Yeah.
And there's another question that came up. As an employee, I could deduct the Kilometerpauschale for traveling. As a freelancer, would this rather be a business expense, or is it still only relevant for income tax?
No, it's also for business expense. Let's say if you're using a private car, so it's you usually use it less than 50% for your business, then you can just deduct 30% per kilometer as an expense, but without VAT. It's just for income taxes.
30 cents, right, per kilometer?
30 cents, yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so we covered that. So at the end of our webinars, we always touch quickly on the issue of tax prepayments.
Yeah,
Andreas,
this is really an issue for all freelancers, for all self-employed. Let's say you start your business last year and you filled out a questionnaire. At the beginning, you have a 8 pages questionnaire and sent to the tax office. You answer the questions because of Kleinunternehmer, and you answer some questions: how much will be your turnover and your profit? And usually most of the freelancers just put 0 in it. That's okay. The tax office will accept it, and you won't pay any tax prepayments in the beginning. And then your business is growing, you get some money, your profit is increasing, good times. And 1 year later, you start filing your tax return, let's say in September, in August, right now. After 2 months, you get an assessment and you have to pay tax on it for 2020 and also prepayments for 2021. So let's say you have calculated at the beginning, you have to have a final payment of 5,000. Right now, you file it and then you have to pay 10,000 because you also have to pay the prepayments for this year. And this is something that's really hurts most of them because you don't have the money and you have just 1 month time to pay it. It also can happen if you later on, let's say it's January, you have a profit of 30,000 euros a year, and 1 year you get an extraordinary payment of 10,000. Your prepayments are too low. Next year you have to make the payment, and you also have to make payments as prepayments, and this is always a bad surprise. So my experience is, in your case, I would, let's say every quarter or every January at the latest, you should do your taxes and make a rough calculation of your prepayments and payments, so you don't get any surprise. You don't have to file the tax return in January, but you have to make a calculation that you can save some money if it's too much.
Good. Last point we covered always is an issue that is not being talked so much about generally, It is the issue planning for the future. So maybe Andreas, can you just quickly give the rules out here for what this looks like on the tech side?
Yeah, there are two possibilities to do something for the future and deduct those expenses. The one is called Rürup. Rürup is a special pension scheme. It's similar to the public pension scheme. And the good thing is you can deduct it from your taxes. Yeah, you wrote it in the chat. So you can deduct from your taxes and reduce your tax. You have to tax it later on. But usually it's better for you because later on your tax rate will be lower because you could just receive a pension or something like this. Usually you earn more money right now. And so it's always a good deal. The other one is KSK, Künstlersozialkasse. So if you're working as an artist, of course, anything that's more artificial, sometimes a photographer, you can apply for going into the Künstlersozialkasse, and then it's like being employed. So it's the client pays half of it also in the Künstlersozialkasse, and later on it's just like the public pension scheme. So if it's possible, in your case, I would check it and apply for going into the KSK.
Yeah, it's important to know that this is only for jobs that can argue that they're working, say, writing, photography, artists, everything that is being connected with being an artist. It is called the Artist Pension Fund. It's very special in Germany. If you can get in, it's probably a good deal. Generally, for developers, it might not be accessible depending on what you do, but just to mention it as to round this up. So that's basically the information we want to share with you guys today. If there are any questions that we weren't able to answer so far, please send them now in the chat. If you have something else or more specific you would like to discuss, feel free to contact us in the Accountable app in the chat or on our website. We would also be happy to set up a phone call with Andreas if you feel like you need some more advice from Tax Advisor Pro. That's it from us for now. Thanks for your attention, and hope you have a great evening, Andreas, right?
Yeah, thanks for listening.
Yeah, thank you very much.
And thanks, guys.
All
so that's
and all the further information due to the webinar you will find as well on our homepage. Nice. So thank you. Bye. Have a nice evening.
Bye-bye.